Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of Aurora's dawn, watching the stars through the main viewing screen. His hands gripped the metal railing as he tried to calm his racing heart. Today would change everything for humanity. After 3 months of travel through deep space, they had finally reached the meeting point where Earth's first contact with alien life would happen. The ship hummed quietly around him as his crew worked at their stations. Dr. Lisa Chun sat at the science console, her fingers dancing across the controls as she ran final checks on their translation systems. She had spent years preparing for this moment, learning everything humans knew about possible alien languages and communication methods. "Captain, we're getting a signal," said Lieutenant Paul Hayes from the communication station. His voice carried a mix of excitement and fear that Jake knew everyone on the ship was feeling. "Put it on screen," Jake ordered, straightening his uniform jacket. The viewing screen flickered and changed. Where stars had been moments before, now showed a massive alien vessel that dwarfed their own ship. The craft looked like a crystal mountain, floating in space with smooth surfaces that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Jake had never seen anything so beautiful or terrifying. A face appeared on the screen, and Jake had to fight not to step backward. The alien was tall and thin, with pale blue skin that looked almost translucent. Its eyes were large and completely black, showing no emotion at all. When it spoke, the words came through their translation system in a flat, mechanical voice. I'm Ambassador Keth 7 of the Zilithian Empire. You are the representatives of the species called humans from the planet you name Earth." "Yes," Jake replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I am Captain Jake Morrison. We come in peace, hoping to learn about your people and share knowledge." The alien's expression did not change at all. "Your emotional display is noted and cataloged. The Zilithian Empire has ruled this galaxy for 4,000 of your years. We have encountered many species. Most prove unsuitable for inclusion in our civilization." Lisa leaned forward at her station, her scientific curiosity overcoming her nervousness. "What makes a species suitable?" she asked. Ambassador Keth 7 turned those black eyes toward her. "Logic, order, the ability to control primitive emotional responses that lead to chaos and inefficiency. Your species displays excessive emotional behavior that suggests evolutionary weakness." Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but forced himself to remain calm. Emotions aren't weakness. They're part of what makes us human. They help us create, love, and find meaning in life. "Precisely the problem," Kef 7 replied without any change in tone. "Love, as you call it, leads to irrational decisions. Creativity without logic leads to waste. Meaning is found in efficiency and order, not in chaotic emotional attachments." The alien paused, and Jake could see other figures moving behind Keth 7 on their ship. All of them looked the same, tall, pale, and completely emotionless. It was like looking at living machines rather than people. "However," Keth 7 continued, "the Galactic Council has decreed that all species must be given opportunity to prove their worth. You will be given standard probationary period of 30 rotations to demonstrate that your species can contribute to galactic civilization." 30 days, Lisa whispered, checking her calculations. "What kind of test?" "You will be presented with challenge that has remained unsolved for 3,000 years. If you succeed, humanity will be granted junior membership in the Empire. If you fail, your species will be classified as unsuitable and restricted to your home system permanently." Jake's stomach dropped. Being trapped in their own solar system forever would doom humanity to eventual extinction as their sun died. But 30 days to solve something the aliens couldn't figure out in 3 millennia seemed impossible. "What is this challenge?" Jake asked. "It is called the Kith Morin Paradox. Our greatest minds have studied it since the time of the Great Cleansing. It involves creating perfect balance between order and chaos, logic and what you might call creativity. The solution requires mathematical precision, combined with something our people have evolved beyond. Lisa was frantically taking notes, her eyes bright with the kind of excitement Jake had seen whenever she encountered a new scientific puzzle. Can you give us more details about the parameters? All necessary information will be transmitted to your vessel. You have access to our historical databases for research purposes. The test begins now. The screen flickered, and suddenly Jake's communications officer was reporting massive data downloads flooding their systems. Lisa was already diving into the information, her fingers flying over her console as she began analyzing what they had received. Ambassador Keth 7, Jake called out, but the alien had already disappeared from the screen. The crystal ship remained visible, hanging in space like a beautiful threat. Jake walked over to Lisa's station. What do you think? Can we solve this thing? Lisa looked up at him, and Jake was surprised to see something like hope in her eyes. Jake, look at what they're calling the Great Cleansing. It happened 3,000 years ago, right around the time this paradox became unsolvable for them. She pulled up historical records on her screen. Jake could see images of Zilithian cities, but these looked different from the cold, efficient structures he had expected. These buildings were curved and artistic, with decorations that seemed to serve no practical purpose except beauty. These are old records from before the Great Cleansing, Lisa explained. Look at how different they were. The architecture, the clothing, even their faces looked different. Jake studied the images. The ancient Zilithians did look different. Their expressions showed what looked like emotions: joy, sadness, anger, love. They looked alive in a way that Ambassador Keth 7 and his people did not. What happened to them? Jake asked. I don't know yet, but I think the answer might be connected to this paradox they want us to solve. Jake, what if the reason they can't solve it isn't because it's too hard? What if it's because they've lost something they need to find the answer? Jake looked back at the viewing screen where the alien ship waited silently. You think they've lost their emotions? More than that, Lisa said quietly. I think they've lost their souls. The next morning, Jake found Lisa still at her workstation, surrounded by empty coffee cups and data tablets. She had been working through the night, diving deep into the Zilithian historical records. Her hair was messy and her clothes wrinkled, but her eyes burned with determination. Have you slept at all? Jake asked, setting a fresh cup of coffee beside her. I can sleep after we save humanity, Lisa replied, not looking up from her screen. Jake, I found something incredible. The Keth-Morin paradox isn't just a math problem. It's about consciousness itself. She pulled up a complex diagram that hurt Jake's head to look at. Numbers and symbols flowed across the screen in patterns that seemed almost alive. The paradox asks how to create perfect harmony between pure logic and pure chaos. But here's the thing. Every civilization that's tried to solve it has approached it as either a logic problem or a creativity problem. None have tried to solve it as both at the same time. What do you mean? Jake asked, settling into the chair beside her. Look at this, Lisa said, pointing to sections of the paradox. This part requires mathematical precision that would make a computer weep. But this other part needs intuitive leaps that have no logical basis. You need both kinds of thinking happening simultaneously in the same mind. Jake studied the problem, trying to understand. So we need someone who can think logically and creatively at the same time. Exactly. And the Zilithians can't do that anymore because they've trained themselves to suppress the creative, intuitive parts of their minds. They see emotions and creativity as weaknesses to be eliminated. Before Jake could respond, his communication officer interrupted. Captain, We're receiving a request from the Zilithian ship. Someone wants permission to come aboard. Jake and Lisa exchanged glances. Who? Cultural Attaché Vara 9. She says she wants to observe human work methods for her research. Jake hesitated. Having an alien spy watching their every move wasn't appealing, but refusing might seem hostile. Tell her she can come aboard, but she'd be accompanied by security at all times. An hour later, Jake stood in the shuttle bay as the Zilithian transport arrived. The craft was small and elegant, landing with barely a whisper of sound. When the door opened, Jake was surprised by what he saw. Vara 9 looked different from Ambassador Keth 7. She was younger, for one thing, though Jake wasn't sure how he could tell with alien features. Her skin had the same pale blue color, but it seemed warmer somehow. Her large black eyes held something that might have been curiosity, though she tried to keep her expression neutral. Captain Morrison, she said, her voice coming through the translation device attached to her collar. I am grateful for permission to observe your work. Welcome aboard, Jake replied. Something about her seemed less cold than the other Zilithians he had met. Dr. Chun is leading our research team. I'll take you to her. As they walked through the ship's corridors, Jake noticed Vara 9 looking at everything with what seemed like fascination. She paused at a viewport showing the stars, staring out into space for several seconds before catching herself and moving on. They found Lisa in the main laboratory, where she had set up workstations for the entire science team. Humans were gathered around multiple screens, attacking different parts of the paradox from various angles. The room buzzed with energy and excitement. Dr. Chun, Jake said, this is Cultural Attaché Vara 9. She's here to observe our methods. Lisa looked up from her calculations and smiled warmly. Welcome. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the paradox. Your people have been studying it much longer than we have. Vara 9 seemed startled by Lisa's friendly tone. I am not authorized to provide assistance. I am here only to observe and report. Of course, Lisa said, but she continued including Vara 9 in their discussions anyway. We're trying to understand why the paradox became unsolvable 3,000 years ago. That timing seems significant. Throughout the day, Jake watched Vara 9 carefully. The alien woman stood quietly in corners, taking notes on a device that looked like crystallized light. But Jake noticed small things, the way her eyes lingered on artwork in the corridors, how she seemed to enjoy the sound of human laughter. From the mess hall, the way she tilted her head when someone made a joke even though she never smiled. During lunch, Jake sat across from Vara 9 in the officers' dining room. She had politely declined human food, sustaining herself with some kind of nutrient capsule instead. What do you think of our ship? Jake asked, trying to make conversation. It is less efficient than Zilithian design, Vara 9 replied automatically. You waste space on decorative elements and recreational facilities. But do you like it? Jake pressed gently. Vara 9 paused, looking confused by the question. Like is not a relevant concept. Function determines value. What about beauty? Do Zilithians find anything beautiful? Beauty serves no logical purpose, she said, but Jake noticed her eyes drift to a painting on the wall. A landscape from Earth showing mountains reflected in a lake. She stared at it for several seconds before looking away. That evening, Jake found Vara 9 standing alone in the observation lounge, looking out at the stars. She seemed different when she thought no one was watching. Her posture was less rigid, her expression softer. Couldn't sleep? Jake asked quietly, not wanting to startle her. Zilithians require only 4 hours of rest per cycle, she replied. But she didn't turn away from the window. The stars are beautiful from here, Jake said, joining her at the viewport. Beauty is not ... double quotes, she started, then stopped. For a moment, she seemed to struggle with something. I do not understand your species' obsession with concepts that serve no function. Maybe function isn't everything, Jake suggested. Maybe some things are valuable just because they make life worth living. Vara 9 turned to look at him, and Jake saw something in her eyes that looked almost like pain. My people learned long ago that such thinking leads to chaos and suffering. The Great Cleansing removed these weaknesses from our society. What was the Great Cleansing? Jake asked. Gently, a time of necessary reform. Our people were ... chaotic before. They made decisions based on irrational emotions. Wars were fought over abstract concepts like love and honor. Art was created for no productive purpose. The cleansing brought order and efficiency. But you lost something too, didn't you? Jake asked. Vara 9 was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke so softly that Jake almost didn't hear her. Sometimes I have dreams. They show Zilithians who laugh and cry and create beautiful things for no reason except joy. When I wake, I feel strange, as if something important is missing. Jake felt his heart racing. This was the first crack he had seen in the Zilithian emotional walls. What do you think is missing? I do not know, Vara 9 whispered. But when I look at your people, when I see how you care for each other and find joy in simple things, I feel that same strange emptiness. Jake turned to face her fully. Maybe that emptiness is where love used to be. Vara 9's eyes widened, and for just a moment, Jake saw something that looked like longing in her expression before she quickly controlled it again. 2 weeks into their 30-day deadline, Lisa made a breakthrough that changed everything. Jake found her in the laboratory at dawn, staring at her screen with wide eyes and trembling hands. Jake, you need to see this, she said, her voice filled with excitement and fear. I think I know why the Zilithians can't solve the paradox. She pulled up her analysis, showing brain scans and neural pathway diagrams. I've been studying their historical records and comparing them to what we know about human consciousness. The Keth-Morin paradox requires something called integrated processing, the ability to use logical and creative thinking simultaneously. And the Zilithians can't do that? Jake asked. Not anymore. Look at these brain scans from before the Great Cleansing. Lisa showed him images of Zilithian neural activity that looked vibrant and complex. Now look at modern Zilithian brains. The new scans showed organized patterns, but large sections appeared almost dead. They've surgically removed their capacity for emotional and creative thought, Lisa whispered. The Great Cleansing wasn't just cultural reform. It was biological modification on a massive scale. Jake felt sick. They mutilated themselves. But here's the thing, Lisa continued, pulling up more data. The modifications aren't permanent. The neural pathways are suppressed, not destroyed. With the right stimulus, they could potentially be reactivated. Before Jake could respond, his communication officer's voice came over the intercom. Captain, we have a problem. 3 more Zilithian ships just arrived, and they're demanding to speak with you immediately. Jake and Lisa rushed to the bridge, where the main screen showed 4 Zilithian vessels surrounding Aurora's Dawn. The newcomers were larger and more military in design than Ambassador Keth 7's ship. This is Fleet Commander Zeth Prime, came a cold voice through their communications. We have detected contamination protocols have been violated. Cultural attach Vara 9 has been exposed to excessive emotional stimuli and must be returned immediately for reconditioning. Jake's blood ran cold. Reconditioning? The attach has begun displaying aberrant behavior patterns. She has been observed spending unnecessary time with your crew and asking questions outside her mission parameters. This suggests dangerous, emotional awakening that must be corrected. You can't force her to undergo medical procedures against her will, Jake protested. Vara 9 belongs to the Zilithian Empire. Her individual preferences are irrelevant to the greater good of our civilization. The transmission ended, and Jake immediately called for Vara 9 to come to the bridge. When she arrived, he could see fear in her eyes, despite her attempt to remain composed. "They want to take you back," Jake said gently. "They say you need reconditioning." Vara 9's hands began to shake slightly. "I have been having more dreams, stronger ones. I see colors that have no names and hear music that makes me feel things I cannot describe. The Council considers this a malfunction." "It's not a malfunction," Lisa said firmly. "You're remembering what your people used to be. The dreams are your suppressed emotions trying to break through. But if I do not return, they will consider it defection. The penalty is death." Jake made a decision that would change the course of both their species. "Then don't go back. Stay here and help us solve the paradox. If we succeed, maybe we can find a way to help your people remember what they've lost." Vara 9 stared at him, in shock. "You would risk war with the Empire to protect me?" "Yes," Jake said without hesitation. "Because you're not just a Zilithian anymore. You're becoming yourself again." Over the communication system, Fleet Commander Zeeth Prime's voice returned. "You have 1 hour to return our citizen, or we will. Take her by force." Jake opened a channel to all Zilithian ships. "This is Captain Morrison. Vara 9 has requested asylum aboard our vessel. We will not surrender her against her will. Then you have chosen conflict. Prepare to be boarded." The next hour was tense as both sides prepared for confrontation. But Jake had underestimated how much Vara 9's presence had affected other Zilithians. During the standoff, 3 more cultural attaches from other ships requested permission to come aboard Aurora's Dawn. "We too have been having dreams," one of them explained when they arrived. "Seeing Vara 9's transformation gives us hope that the dreams mean something." Lisa worked frantically with the awakening Zilithians, using music, art, and emotional exercises to help stimulate their suppressed neural pathways. The results were remarkable. As their emotional capacity returned, their ability to understand the paradox increased dramatically. "The solution requires mathematical precision, guided by intuitive leaps," explained Kelfor, one of the awakening Zilithians. "We can see the logical framework, but we need emotional intelligence to make the creative connections." Working together, humans and awakening Zilithians began making rapid progress on the paradox. But their collaboration was interrupted when Zilithian soldiers attempted to board Aurora's Dawn by force. Jake's security team held them off, but barely. During the fighting, Vara 9 did something that shocked everyone. When a Zilithian soldier aimed his weapon at Jake, she threw herself between them, screaming, "No!" with such emotion that even the soldier hesitated. "Why do you protect the human?" the soldier demanded. Vara 9 looked at Jake, and her eyes were brighter than Jake had ever seen them. Tears, actual tears, were flowing down her face. "Because I love him," she said, the words seeming to surprise her as much as everyone else. "I remember what love feels like, and I will not let you destroy it again." The soldier stepped back, confusion clear on his face. He had never seen a Zilithian cry before. Lisa chose that moment to make her announcement. "I've solved it," she called out over the ship's intercom system. "I've solved the Kethmoran paradox." Everyone, human and Zilithian alike, rushed to the laboratory where Lisa had her solution displayed on the main screen. The equation was beautiful in its complexity, showing how logical structure and creative intuition could work together in perfect harmony. "The answer was never about choosing between order and chaos," Lisa explained. "It's about finding the balance point where both can exist together. Logic provides the framework, but creativity provides the spark that makes the framework come alive." Even the Zilithian soldiers were staring at the solution in amazement. One of them slowly removed his helmet, revealing a face that showed the first stirrings of wonder. "How?" Fleet Commander Zeeth Prime's voice came over the communication system. "How did you solve what our greatest minds could not?" Jake looked at Vara 9, whose tears were still flowing freely. "Because we had something your people gave up long ago. We had love." The silence that followed was broken by a single transmission from the Zilithian fleet. It was not from Fleet Commander Zeth Prime, but from someone else entirely. A voice filled with emotion that no Zilithian should have been. Able to feel. "I remember," the voice said. "I remember what we used to be." The voice belonged to High Admiral Neth 9, commander of the largest Zilithian warship in the fleet. Within hours of Lisa's breakthrough, chaos erupted throughout the Zilithian forces as more individuals began experiencing emotional awakening. The solution to the paradox had somehow triggered a cascade effect, helping suppressed Zilithians remember what they had lost. Jake watched from the bridge as the alien fleet began to tear itself apart. Ships that had been in perfect formation now moved erratically as their crews struggled with unfamiliar feelings. Some vessels broke away entirely, while others maintained strict military discipline. "Captain," Lieutenant Hayes reported from communications, "we're receiving hundreds of transmissions from the Zilithian ships. Some are requesting asylum. Others are calling for immediate military action against us." On the main screen, Jake could see Zilithian shuttles launching from various ships, some heading toward Aurora's dawn, while others fled toward empty space. The careful order that had defined their society for 3,000 years was crumbling in real time. Vara 9 stood beside Jake, her hand finding his as they watched her people's civilization tear itself apart. She was no longer hiding her emotions, and tears flowed freely down her face. "I have destroyed my own people," she whispered. "No," Jake said firmly, squeezing her hand. "You've given them back their souls." The first refugee shuttle docked with Aurora's dawn, carrying 12 Zilithians who begged for sanctuary. They were led by High Admiral Neth 9, whose transformation was remarkable. Where before there had been cold efficiency, now Jake could see wonder, fear, and desperate hope in her expression. "I remember my daughter," Neth 9 said, her voice breaking. "I had a daughter before the cleansing. They told me she was irrelevant to my duties, and I believed them. But I loved her. I loved her so much that it felt like dying when they made me forget." Dr. Lisa Chun had set up a medical station to help the awakening Zilithians cope with their returning emotions. The process was not easy. 3,000 years of suppressed feelings were flooding back all at once, and many of the refugees were overwhelmed. Their neural pathways are reactivating faster than their minds can process, Lisa explained to Jake. "It's like suddenly being able to see color after a lifetime of blindness. Beautiful, but overwhelming." Meanwhile, the Zilithian High Command was mobilizing for war. Fleet Commander Zeth Prime had been replaced by Supreme Commander Veek 1, a hardliner who viewed the emotional awakening as a plague that threatened their entire civilization. "This contamination must be stopped before it spreads to the home worlds," came Veek 1's transmission to Aurora's dawn. "All infected individuals will be destroyed to prevent further damage to our society." Jake found himself in command of an increasingly desperate situation. More Zilithian refugees were arriving every hour, but so were military ships loyal to the High Command. The awakening Zilithians were caught between rediscovering their humanity and facing execution by their own people. The crisis reached its peak when Veek 1 issued an ultimatum: surrender all infected individuals and submit to immediate execution, or face the full might of the Zilithian fleet. Jake's response was broadcast across all channels: "We will not surrender innocent people to be murdered for the crime of feeling. If you want them, you'll have to go through us." The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. On one side stood the cold efficiency of military Zilithians, their ships moving in perfect formation with deadly precision. On the other was a desperate alliance of humans and awakening Zilithians whose emotions gave them something their opponents lacked: the ability to think creatively under pressure. Vara 9 proved crucial in the fighting. Her knowledge of Zilithian technology, combined with her returning emotional intelligence, allowed her to anticipate enemy tactics in ways that pure logic could not match. She sat beside Jake on the bridge, coordinating defensive strategies that confused and frustrated the attacking fleet. "They expect us to follow standard military protocols," she explained as she guided their evasive maneuvers. "But love makes us unpredictable. We will take risks for each other that they cannot calculate." The tide of battle turned when High Admiral Neth 9 convinced several neutral Zilithian ships to join their cause. Her emotional appeals to former colleagues struck home with those who had begun to experience their own awakening. "Remember who we used to be," she broadcast to the entire fleet. "Remember the children we loved, the art we created, the dreams we shared before the cleansing stole them from us. Is this cold existence really living, or are we already dead?" One by one, ships began switching sides. Each defection weakened the military forces while strengthening the alliance of humans and awakening Zilithians. But Supreme Commander Veek 1 was not finished. He had one final weapon to deploy. "If you cannot be reformed, you will be eliminated," came his final transmission. "I am authorizing use of the Silence Protocol." Jake had never heard of the Silence Protocol, but Vara 9's face went pale with terror. "It's a weapon designed to destroy emotional capacity permanently," she explained. "Not just suppress it like the cleansing did, but burn out the neural pathways completely. Anyone caught in its field becomes completely emotionless forever." The weapon charged with ominous energy, its targeting system locking onto Aurora's Dawn and the refugee ships around it. Jake realized with horror that they were about to witness the permanent destruction of everything that made intelligent life meaningful. But as the weapon prepared to fire, something unexpected happened. Dr. Lisa Chun's solution to the Kethmoran paradox had been broadcasting continuously since her breakthrough, and its effects were spreading far beyond the immediate battle. Across the galaxy, Zilithians who had been monitoring the transmission began experiencing their own emotional awakenings. Reports flooded in from Zilithian worlds where citizens were suddenly remembering how to feel. The rigid social order that had maintained their empire for millennia was collapsing as people rediscovered love, creativity, and individual identity. Supreme Commander Veek 1 found himself facing not just a local rebellion, but a galaxy-wide revolution. His own crew was beginning to question their orders as suppressed emotions stirred within them. In desperation, he fired the Silence Protocol early, hoping to at least eliminate the source of the contamination. But the weapon's targeting was affected by his crew's wavering emotional state. Instead of hitting Aurora's Dawn, the energy beam struck empty space harmlessly. As the weapon recycled for another shot, something remarkable happened aboard Veek 1's flagship. His second-in-command, a Zilithian named Kel Prime, slowly removed her command helmet. Tears were streaming down her face as she looked at her superior with eyes that had just remembered how to feel. "Commander," she said softly, "I remember my name. My real name, from before the cleansing. It was Kella, and I had a garden where I grew flowers just because they were beautiful." Veek 1 stepped back, his weapon systems powering down as his own suppressed memories began to surface. Jake watched from his screen as the last bastion of the old Zilithian order finally crumbled from within. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. 6 months after the battle that changed galactic history, Jake stood in what had once been the Zilithian High Command Center. The sterile metal walls had been painted with murals depicting scenes of joy and celebration. Children's laughter echoed through corridors that had known only silence for for 3,000 years. The transformation of Venso, Zilithian society, happened faster than anyone had imagined possible. Once the first individuals remembered how to feel, the awakening spread like wildfire. Across their worlds, families reunited after millennia of emotional separation. Artists emerged from hiding to create works of beauty that brought tears to eyes that had forgotten how to cry. Dr. Lisa Chun had become something of a celebrity among the awakening Zilithians. Her solution to the Kethmoran paradox was studied, not as a mathematical achievement, but as the key that unlocked their species' lost soul. She spent her days helping establish emotional rehabilitation centers across the former empire. "It's remarkable," she told Jake during one of their walks. "Through the transformed capital city, they're not becoming human. They're becoming themselves again, but with 3,000 years of accumulated knowledge and wisdom. They're going to accomplish incredible things." The political changes were equally dramatic. The rigid hierarchy of the empire had been replaced by something they called the Zilithian Collective, a democratic system where decisions were made through a combination of logical analysis and emotional wisdom. Former Supreme Commander Veek I, now simply called Veek by his chosen name, had become one of their most passionate advocates for emotional education. "We spent so long believing that feelings made us weak," he explained to Jake during a diplomatic meeting. "We did not realize that they are what make life worth living. Logic without love is just sophisticated death." But the most profound change was in Varanine herself. She had chosen the name Vara as her true identity, keeping only the number as a reminder of where she had come from. Her transformation from cold observer to passionate advocate had inspired millions of her people to embrace the returning emotions. Jake found her that evening in their favorite spot, a garden that had been built on the site of the former military command center. She was tending to flowers that bloomed in colors that had no names in human language, her face radiant with contentment. "The council approved the final proposal today," she told him, not looking up from her work. "Humanity will not just be granted membership in our new society. You will be honored as the species that saved us from ourselves." "We didn't save you," Jake replied, sitting beside her on the garden bench they had built together. "We just reminded you that you are worth saving." Vara smiled, and Jake never tired of seeing the joy that lit up her features. The capacity for happiness that had been surgically removed from her people was returning stronger than ever, as if making up for lost time. "There is something else," she said, turning to face him fully. "Something I need to tell you." Jake felt his heart skip a beat at the serious tone in her voice. "What is it?" "The researchers studying our neural recovery have discovered something unexpected. The process of emotional awakening has triggered evolutionary changes in our species. We are developing new capacities, enhanced creativity, deeper empathy, stronger intuitive abilities. But these changes are accelerating beyond what should be naturally possible." "That sounds like good news," Jake said carefully. "It is, except for one thing. The changes appear to be connected to our emotional bonds with humans. The stronger the connection, the more dramatic the transformation. And the strongest connections of all are those we call love bonds." Jake began to understand where this was going. "You're changing because of our relationship." "Yes, and not just me. All of the awakening Zilithians who have formed close friendships or romantic partnerships with humans are evolving at an accelerated rate. We are becoming something new, not quite Zilithian anymore, but not human either." Vara stood and walked to the center of the garden, where a fountain played music as its water danced in impossible patterns. The sound was hauntingly beautiful, created by Zilithian technology, guided by human aesthetic sensibility. "The question is whether this frightens you," she said, her back still turned to him. "I am no longer the being you first met. I am becoming something unprecedented in galactic history." Jake joined her at the fountain, taking her hands in his. "Are you still you? Do you still choose to be here with me?" "More than ever," she replied, her eyes shining with unshed tears.